Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started. And those that trickle in, and they'll just jump in wherever we're at. But thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to continue this series that we've had with Empowering Financial Wellness Program, and to have Alicia and Vincenza again joining us. And I'm excited for this one. I know this has been on my mind, and I'm like, where do I even start? How do I get going? So I'm glad that we're covering this. Couple of housekeeping items. Please make sure that you're muted. If you have questions, put them in the chat, either directly or to all of us. We'll monitor that and make sure that gets answered. If you're needing live transcription, you can turn that on at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We are recording this today. We're getting those online so that you can watch them later. I don't have links yet, but we're finalizing those up to watch the past recordings. And then this also qualifies for the Be Well Rewards program. So make sure that if you want to use this for that activity, you select that in ServiceNow, and then you can put which date, and we'll verify from our records who attended. So, all right. I will turn it over to, I think, Alicia, are you going to start first? Okay, floor is yours. Alicia, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Joys of Zoom. Thank you for your patience. As we saw on the screen there, we will be talking about estate planning today, and at least the basics, and even just thinking more about it as life planning, because the things that we'll be talking about today will affect all of us, which we will see kind of here in our little intro right here. And this is something that our team has seen a great need for over the last couple of years, as we have a lot of uncertainty or just the applicability of estate planning for everybody. And so just a couple of items to kind of introduce us into the topic today before we really jump into it. These are some myths right here that many people are thinking, and that we wanted to kind of dispel before we really jump in. And so first of all, estate planning isn't only for wealthy people. So no matter the value of the assets you own, it is important to have a plan for what will happen to the assets that you do have, and then also your care that you would like to have at the end of your life, or just whenever you become sick and it's like, okay, who's going to step in and take care of the finances for a time? Will it be your spouse? Will it be somebody else? And also, like, for your aging parents, do they have a plan in place for what will happen in those circumstances as well? Will it involve you even? And then our second thing we just wanted to briefly talk about is that estate planning isn't just having a will. Today, we will be talking about lots of other different aspects of having an estate plan besides just having a will. Having a will is very important, but there are lots of other areas of an estate plan as well. And we will be talking about some of those very briefly today, but then also some other resources to help you in getting started with those as well. And then estate planning is necessary for people of all ages. It's not just for older people. And this is something that we've really seen and had come up over the last couple of years, that you never really know when you may become incapacitated, or that you may pass away. Even though we don't really want to think about it, it is important, like what Vincenza will talk to us about here in a minute, that we have a plan in place no matter what age we are, so that we can minimize the stress and other kind of the chaos that may come up if we don't have a plan in place. And then ultimately, everybody should have an estate plan. That's something that we hope that you take away from our time together today, is that an estate plan is something necessary for everybody, not just men, not just women, not just the older people in our lives, or if you're older, that's not just for you, but it really is for everybody to have in place. And so we have a couple of objectives we're going to be going over today. So we'll be talking about some of the other documents in addition to a will that it is necessary or important to prepare for an estate plan. We'll talk about a couple of basic tips to help you out in getting started with an estate plan, because like Alyssa mentioned, it can be hard to know where to get started, and finances is already a hard topic to talk about. And so we will be talking about some tips with getting started with your estate plan, as well as also starting the conversation with your family. And we do want to put a little disclaimer out there that we are not, we're not legal attorneys or estate planning attorneys giving legal advice today, but we are going to just be talking about some of the basics when it comes to our life planning, particularly with our finances and our assets. And we would also like to give you the opportunity to put any questions in the chat that you would like us to make sure that we cover today. And so I'll go ahead and turn the time to Vincenza to take us through our first objective.
Okay, thank you, Alicia. So let's jump into what are some of the documents that are included as part of your estate plan. Obviously, the will is one that most people think about, but there are a lot of misconceptions about there of what really goes into an estate plan. And certainly having a will is a great place to start, but it's not the only document that you would need. And here's a list of some of the ones that will mostly apply to everyone. So for the will, that's where most of your assets would be transferred, having a will. But there are some assets that would not be divided necessarily in a will. Like, for example, if you have a retirement account, you would have a beneficiary listed, and that might be different than what's directed in your will. So it's important to think about those things. And then why do you need a will? It's a great place to start, but that's where you get very specific about what you want to happen once you do pass. Who do you want to inherit your assets or any property that you have? And this is especially important if you have minor children, or if you are a blended family. It can get a little bit more complicated. And so you want to make sure that you're in agreement about how assets would be transferred. And then lastly, having a will avoids probate. Probate means if you die without a will, the state of which you are resident, they will decide how your assets are divided. It follows, they're going to look for relatives, next of kin. But certainly if you have minor children or children with special needs, you would likely want to have some say in who would be the guardian of your children if something were to happen to you. So if we go on to the next, the revocable living trust. So what is a living trust? Well, this is used, a lot of people like to keep things a little bit more private in terms of who's getting what, how assets would be transferred. And it also is not public. Anything that's in a trust, anything that's in a will is considered public. And then a living trust is a way to ensure the continued management of your assets should you die, or even if you become incapacitated. And it can be changed at any time during your life. Some people just are worried that maybe a will would be challenged in a court of law. Maybe there are some family members that are in agreement. So there are a lot of good reasons why somebody may or may not, why they may want to have a living trust. So we encourage you to look into that.
Can you speak really briefly about instances where having a will wouldn't avoid probate? There's a question in the chat about that.
Okay, having a will does not actually avoid, okay, sure. So because I mentioned before that a will is a public document. Anybody could go to the courthouse and get a copy of a will. However, people can contest wills. So just because you have a will doesn't necessarily mean that you could completely avoid probate, because sometimes there's a disagreement among family members, or sometimes people feel that that was not somebody's last will and testament. Some people think that it's not. There are lots of reasons why you could challenge a will in public court. But again, things that are in the trust are going to be private. So some people do that if they have complex assets, or they have a lot of assets, or they just want to be more private about who gets what. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so we'll move on to the next section, because we only have 30 minutes, so we want to be brief and make sure you get all this information. So I mentioned this before, just make sure that you keep your beneficiary designations. A lot of financial products, including life insurance, are not generally governed by your will. So the only way to make sure that your policy benefits are distributed how you intend is to make sure you've named a beneficiary for all of your policies and all of your accounts. And just make sure you keep them updated, especially after major life events, a marriage, a divorce, an adoption, buying or selling of assets. Anytime there's something major that happens in your life that has to do with your assets or family members, you want to make sure that we keep those updated. Okay, the next one.
Make note real quick that your beneficiaries will trump what's in your will. And so that is even more important to make sure they're updated as well.
Okay, so a living will. So you may have heard it as an advanced healthcare directive, living will, it's the same thing. This is a document where it allows you to specify your wishes when you can't speak for yourself concerning medical treatments. For example, in an emergency or end of life. If you don't have an advanced healthcare directive, doctors will obviously speak to the closest family members to make a decision, but it can be difficult if you don't have a living will, and there are differing opinions among family members or loved ones about what they think or should happen with the care or with your care. And so it's extremely important to have one of these, especially if you have very strong opinions about would you want to be resuscitated, or what are your personal beliefs and how you would want to be cared for in the event that you weren't able to speak on your own behalf. And so whoever is the authorized, there's usually you designate a proxy, somebody who speaks on your behalf. You can also have more than one proxy if that person is unable or unwilling, and that person would work with the healthcare professional to make sure all the decisions are made based on what your wishes were stated in this document. So that's a living will. The next one would be a financial power of attorney. So this is somebody that you specifically designate to take care of any financial affairs in the event you are temporarily incapacitated. And so, or sometimes you're challenged, like this person's not of the right mind, they can't make financial decisions. You can designate somebody that you would want to handle your financial matters. And this is one of the areas of your estate plan that is only in effect while you are living. And it is something that is revocable. You can change it while you're living. In case you decide, you pick someone and you decide you'd rather have somebody else, somebody who's better suited, you have the ability to do that. So think about if you were hospitalized or temporarily incapacitated, who's going to pay the bills, who's going to take care of all of the financial things that normally you would be taking care of. The next section is insurance policies and financial documents. Just making sure that you have these together in one place as part of your estate plan. Do you have insurance policies? Where do you have your money? Your bank accounts, your retirement accounts, investment accounts. Gather any financial information that you would be needed in order, for example, for your financial power of attorney to carry on your financial affairs while you're able to, or to be able to close out your accounts. Once you have somebody designated in your will that's going to be the executor of your will, that means they're going to make sure that everything that is written in the will will be executed. It's very important to know how do you know where to transfer assets if you don't even know what the assets the person might have? So this is an important part of your estate planning process. The next section is your identifying documents. This is where you just want to make sure you're keeping this together in one one area, all of your legally identifiable documents like your IDs, your driver's license, your passport. And you should have like a list. This is something that your executor would likely need to have to be able to make sure that all of the terms in your will are executed. It should be somewhere stored securely. We're talking about original documents. You wouldn't want somebody stealing your social security card or your passport, things like that. And so it's also good to have instructions for whoever the executor of your will be, and where do you access this information? Where do you keep it? How is it securely stored? Next thing is your title and property deeds. So just make sure you keep a section in your estate plan of if you own a car title, a home title, a boat, any other types of assets. And just having all of these deeds and titles together can help make the process of transferring ownership to whomever you designated that would inherit those. It's just going to make it that much easier to have those all put together. And then anyone who uses email, has a password protected cell phone, makes online purchases, or pays bills is going to have a digital account. And as we know, digital accounts, typically you have to have a username and a password or a PIN, and they can really be difficult to, or sometimes impossible to retrieve if you don't have that information and the person is temporarily incapacitated or passes away. Some digital assets, it's just for social, for example, social media, but some of them have monetary value tied to them that it's important to have access to. So just make sure that, again, you list all of your digital accounts, what your passwords are, what your PINs are, storing them securely, and whoever needs to have access has instructions on how to access those things. It's just important to make sure that all these things are properly taken care of. So, because a lot of companies won't allow somebody that's not the actual person to access certain accounts. Some people want to memorialize social media accounts for people. If you don't have the username and the password, it's going to be virtually impossible to be able to access those. Okay, the next section is talking about funeral instructions. So this would be separate from any of your other estate documents. You may want to include a letter expressing what your wishes are. For example, some people are very specific about what music they want to have at their funeral, what they want their obituary to say. Some people have already paid for a plot, or they already have things put together. So it's important that somebody knows this, because if you put it as part of your will, sometimes we don't even get to the will. Sometimes people don't even know that the deceased had a will. And so by the time they get the funeral instructions, it can be too late, because that's usually what happens first. So experts do say that it is advisable to just keep this separate from your will and just be clear about what your wishes would be for your funeral. Okay, so I'm going to turn the time back over to Alicia, and she's going to just go briefly through some estate planning tips as you put together your own plan.
Alrighty, so we just have a couple of basic tips to help you in getting started and also in making these preparations. And so our first one is to assume an active role in your finances. And so it's important to be sure that you at least know and understand the basics about your financial assets, including how they're managed. So if you need to step in and be the main person that's managing them, if your partner or spouse is normally the one that takes more of an active role in managing your finances, it's important that you also know how they are being managed, for if you need to step in, if they get sick or hospitalized, or if they were to unexpectedly pass away and leave you to do that managing. And also just making sure that you know and understand how assets should be distributed upon death is very important as well, so that you can kind of decrease the stress that would bring upon you. It's also important to make sure that you coordinate your will with your partner or spouse's will as well. Even though men and women have differing life expectancies, you never really know when one of you may pass away or who will go first. And so it is important that there aren't any discrepancies between your two individual wills. And also just going back to talking about the beneficiaries, making sure that each of you on your different accounts have your beneficiaries up to date. So even take a few minutes on an annual basis and just make sure that your beneficiaries have been updated, that there aren't any changes that you want to make, or if somebody's passed away, make sure that that is updated as well. And this right here is very important, especially with blended families. If there's been a divorce or remarriage, it is so important that you update your will and your beneficiaries so that you don't have assets that will go to your ex-husband or ex-wife or anything like that, or also with children as well, that can come into play with blended families. And then also make sure that insurance coverage is sufficient to help out with your spouse and other children after your passing, even for a couple of years, while things kind of get back to a new normal, we'll say, or even just to help out with your spouse or children during the grieving process can be helpful as well. And then also Vincenzo mentioned this a little bit earlier, that this would be done in a will, but making sure that your legal guardian selection is done for any children that you may have that are minors. Because this is something that can be really stressful for anybody going through the grieving process, but especially for our little children. It is so important that you're not putting them in as chaotic of a situation and having to have the court make that decision for you. I don't know about you guys, but I have a little one and I would much rather have a say in who is going to be taking care of my child if my husband and I were to pass away or end up hospitalized for some reason or another. And so just making sure that that is up to date. And if that is something that's overwhelming to you to think about, even just think of somebody who you know that would make good choices for them, because they will be the one that's taking care of them and also managing their estates and also just being their legal guardian. But even just start with who makes good decisions, and even consider having a backup person as well. But it is essential to make sure that you let them know and you consult them beforehand before putting that in your will. Make sure it's something that they would be okay with. And same with some of the other power of attorneys that we talked about as well, so that there aren't any unpleasant surprises that come up that could cause any contention amongst your family members there. And also, we will be sharing a resource here in just a minute that can be helpful in just getting you started. And so we'll go ahead and go on to our third objective. About starting the conversation with family members, because like I mentioned, talking about finances can already be hard enough or an uncomfortable topic to talk about, and even more so when it comes to estate planning, because oftentimes we think we focus on estate planning just focused on dying or something bad happening. And so we have a few tips that we're going to go over very briefly with you guys to help out in starting the conversation. So our first one is to schedule the conversation. So choose dates and times because there are many different aspects of estate planning to take care of. Like what we very briefly went through, there are many different aspects of an estate plan. It can be overwhelming to try and talk about it and gather all of the information together all at one time. And that could make it a less enjoyable experience for everyone, for you and also other family members. And so schedule a date dates and times, and kind of plan out discussion points of what you would like to achieve during those times. And so that takes us into our second tip of kind of planning out what you want to accomplish in those times. And that could also include planning a time to meet with an attorney to help out with some of these different documents as well. And it doesn't need to be a scripted conversation, but it can just help keep the conversation on track and from getting too emotional or get distracted as well. Choose the appropriate environment. These conversations should be had somewhere where you can be comfortable, but also serious and not having too many distractions. So not having the TV going or having the kids running around, but maybe somewhere that's still comfortable, but not too distracted as well. Our next one is making the conversation relatable. So consider telling a story to get the conversation going. This is something that my husband and I, we do all the time, especially when I want to approach him talking about anything financial. I generally need to bring up a story to help get the conversation going or help him see the importance of it. And so this will help them see why you're bringing it up. You could say, this happened that I saw on TV or that I heard about on TV or with one of my friends with a loved one. And they felt such and such emotions. They were kind of stressed because they weren't as prepared. Or I had this friend that was very prepared with their estate plan, so they were able to enjoy that time and celebrate their loved one's life a lot better. And then our next one is to be an active listener. So to listen and not to be heard. Listen to hear, not to be heard. Sorry. So approach this sensitive topic with understanding, with empathy, and also just actively listening to hear what your loved ones would want to have happen with their care, with their assets, and also just how they're feeling about things as well, because this can help everybody to be more open to discussing these hard topics. And help them to know that you're doing this and bringing it up because you care about them and love them, not because you're seeking gain from them or trying to be greedy or anything like that, because then they'll probably just close off and not be as willing to talk about this. And then lastly, this might be one of the most important ones that we want to leave with you, is the importance of focusing on their legacy or even your own legacy as well when it comes to estate planning, because ultimately it's about decreasing the stress during these hard times and really focusing on how you would want to be remembered and how you would want to help your posterity or other friends out. And so help it to be a positive experience as much as possible by focusing on this legacy rather than having it be an overwhelming or depressing conversation. And so just a little recap about what we talked about in our short time together. We talked about how estate planning is so important for everyone to do, not just certain groups of people. It's not just for elderly people to have. It's not just for men to have or for women or any certain race or anything like that. It's something that everybody needs to have. And then next, we talked about how having an estate plan, it is important to have a will in place, but it is even more than just having a will. There's lots of different parts to your estate plan in addition to a will. And there are some different ways that you can approach the estate planning conversation to help it to be more of a comfortable and positive conversation rather than stressful or hard or uncomfortable and something that everyone dreads. I know that's how I was, especially when I was younger and my mom was like, okay, well, now me and your aunts and uncle, we're going to go take your grandma to meet with an estate planning attorney and go over her estate plan. And they asked me if I wanted to go with them. And I was like, no way. That means that you're just going to be talking about grandma dying and planning things out for that. And I was like super closed off to it because of that. But really now looking back on it, there are so many different ways that we can help it to be an easier and more comfortable conversation. and that really was for our own benefit, so that it would be a less stressful time when those decisions needed to be made or that care needed to take place. And so I'll go ahead. Okay, we have a couple of calls to action that that we want to invite you to take place. So first of all, on our website, so extension.usu.edu or just finance.usu.edu, you will see a button on there about downloading our free estate planning toolkits to help you get started. And that's one of the things that we really want to invite you guys to do. If there's nothing else you take away from this, is to at least go on there and download that, pick a section of the estate plan and set a time to work on it, so that it's less an overwhelming and dreadful thing to do. So you're not like, wow, I have this. And just really start the conversation. So use some of the tips that we shared with you and talk with your family, your spouse, your parents, or even your children about having an estate plan in place. And even consider using the estate planning toolkit as a guide for the conversation as well. So I'll go ahead and turn the time to Vincenza to wrap us up.
Okay, so I went ahead and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I went ahead and put in a link to today's presentation in the chat, as well as a link to the estate planning toolkit, so you can easily grab those. And then a recording will be made in the library for USU Be Well of today's presentation. Thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope you walk away with some information that hopefully will be helpful as you think about your own estate plan or maybe updating what you do have. We would love it if you would complete our evaluation survey and you'll be entered to win a prize. It's just a quick 2 to 3 minute survey. Just want to know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you plan to do as a result of what you learned during today's presentation. And then if you would like to take a personal finance class that goes in pretty deep into lots of different sections of personal finance, check out our PowerPay Money Master online course. And if you're a resident of Utah, it's free. It's completely online, self-paced. It's normally a $40 course, but if you're a Utah resident, you click apply for a fee waiver. And it's a fantastic course, and there's lots of different areas of personal finance that you can learn more about. And if you're interested in taking one of our webinars, we do weekly webinars twice a week on all things personal finance, credit, debt, being financially organized, budgeting. Check out our website, finance.usu.edu/EFW, and see what our schedule is through the month of November. And somebody's asking where we take the survey. If Alicia would go back to the slide, you can either scan this QR code, or I can try to put that, perhaps you can put that in the chat, the link to the survey. I'm not able to copy and paste that into the chat, but that's where you would take the survey. It's right there. Alicia, can you do that? Are you able to put that in the chat? It might be easier for somebody to grab that. And then if you're not already following us on social media, we're at Utah Money Moms. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and Alicia and I write a lot of content, and we're just sharing lots of tips about personal finance. Keep it simple, but be helpful about all the things going on with personal finances. So check us out at Utah Money Moms, and follow us along there. Are you trying to put that link in the chat, Alicia? Okay. Does anybody have any questions before we? There we go. Thank you, Alicia. Let's see, I'm looking at the chat. Let's see. Okay. So I would say it doesn't hurt even if you sit down one time with an estate planning attorney and put together an estate plan, and it might be something that you pay one time. Sometimes employers have that as part of a benefit to meet with, get some basic advice for creating your own estate plan. I know that if you're low income, you can get assistance for free through not-for-profits, but And the cost varies. It could be a few $100s if you have a very simple estate, to a few $1,000s if you have a very complex estate. There are do-it-yourself. You can go online. You just have to read the rules about what's considered valid in your state. Oh, so somebody's saying you can sign up for MetLife Legal for a year and then cancel it. Oh, that's a good idea too. A nice hack there, to be able to get that set up for free. Great advice, thank you. Good to know, yeah. Anybody else have any questions? I know we've gone a little bit over our time, but we want to make sure that while we're here, if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
I did just want to jump in real quick and mention that this recording will be available on the ILS system and also on our YouTube page. So you can go ahead and check out our YouTube page. It's at USU Be Well. Give us about a week and we'll be able to post it up there. Other than that, thank you, Alicia, and thank you, Vincenza. That was great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and for those of you that are still here with us, we will be doing another one of these lunch and learns in November, and then also December. We'll be talking about credit and then debt as well, or our other topics. So debt management with a cool tool called PowerPay.
So there is a question about taxes and choosing beneficiaries, and it's a pretty broad question, and I don't know if that's something that we may be qualified to answer, but I don't know if you mean like the tax implication of inheritance. Because there's a pretty high threshold of when you start paying estate taxes. It's like in the millions of dollars. So if you have a complex estate or a high value estate, then you definitely want to be talking to an estate planning attorney. And choosing beneficiaries is just simply a way to make sure who you want to get the money. And one of the things that, for example, I did in my trust is when you have young children and you want to be mindful about, perhaps some people don't want their young children to inherit a lot of money all at one time. That's something you could put in a trust. You could be very specific about when you wanted somebody to receive an inheritance. Perhaps it's so much at one age, so much at another age, if there are people that are concerned about a young person having access to too much money that maybe they won't feel like they would be responsible. So I don't know if that helps, but definitely can't go wrong with speaking to a qualified estate planning attorney to answer any more complex questions that you may have about estate planning.
And as far as broadly on the tax part, I believe as of right now, you have to have over 11 million is like the cutoff as far as having more of those tax implications right there.